In this one, I'm going to review Palsteron's Ball Lightning Archmage League Starter. I'm going to talk about why I started playing the build, what I think of the build. I'm also going to talk about some tips that I've picked up along the way to help you into the Ball Lightning experience. At the end, I'll give you my recommendation of whether or not you should play this build. At the start of the Necropolis League, I was really intrigued by the reworked Archmage support. I also have never really created a mana tank, and that is something else I wanted to try. With the theme set for my new League starter, it was time to go and find a guide. The first guide I practiced was Arc. It was pretty good. Unfortunately, the tank just wasn't there, and so I abandoned the build. With only one day to go until League start, I had to find something else, and quickly. I came across Palsteron's League starter. It looked appealing. I've never tried Ball Lightning before. The build did come with quite a big disclaimer that it may not even work because we can't test Archmage support. But despite that, I picked it up and I managed to practice just to the first map, and the build was fine. It leveled fairly quickly. So League start came around and I managed to get to maps quicker than I'd ever done before. I actually got to tier 3 maps in the first night. I normally don't even make it to maps in the first night. So far, I've spent somewhere between 8 and 9 divines on the build. So whilst it's not super budget, it also isn't really expensive. The biggest thing I picked up to help my clear is Impulsor's Broken Heart. This chess piece is a game changer. Literally, I just pop everything. These are 3 or 4 divine if you want to buy one outright. However, I made mine myself. I paid 1.4 divine for a 2-link base and then about 100 chaos linking it. If you want to know how to link really cheap in this league, I've got a video at the end that you can click on and see. As you can no doubt see from the video in the background, this thing clears like a god. It's definitely a 9 out of 10 on clear. The only thing I've played that's ever beaten it is Explosive Arrow, and that's pretty much dead this league. In fact, the movement skill alone decimates most trash. The movement skill I'm using is a transfigured version of Frostblink. It's Frostblink of Wintry Blast. It has no cooldown, so if you stack cast speed on it, you can absolutely fly across the map. I'm so impressed with the movement skill, I'm so tempted to try and actually build a build around it. Okay, so what about map bosses? How are they to kill? Well, they're easy. In a tier 16, they don't last long. It's also really good at rare monsters from Harvest. If you want to unharvest with this build, it's a great choice. What about the defenses of the build? Well, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Whilst it's absolutely great for maps, it's just not amazing on endgame bosses. It has an absolutely huge life pool. The version I'm currently running has 3.4k life, 3.6k shield, and 6.3k mana. That is a huge buffer. But it's just that, a buffer. There are absolutely no other defences behind the build. That said, the buffer is large enough that normally it feels perfectly comfortable. I did get my first 2 watchstones with just 2 deaths. The first was fighting Black Star, and the second was the Searing Exile balls. I really hate that fight. The other 2, absolutely no problem at all. So if you're a decent player and you can dodge out of the way of attacks, just getting hit occasionally, this build is absolutely fine. The buffer is going to save you quite a lot of the time. The problem you're going to face is something like the Guardians. If they've got Maven on them, they're really hard to kill. Also, I was lucky enough to get this guy with a green thing in him, and he just absolutely wrecked me. And I did this at level 93 because I just wanted a showcase of how the build was with bosses. I lost so much XP in the making of this video. The fight was possible in 6 portals, and so the game is perfectly playable if you don't mind dying a bit. My next scoring criteria is going to be how is this build as a league starter? And I'm going to give it 10 out of 10. It can do everything a league starter needs to be able to do. Get you your first 2 watchstones, mostly complete your Atlas, run a bit of Harvest, clear tier 16s, make some money. And it scales off very little investment. What about support for the build? Well, whilst I haven't watched any of Palsteron's follow-up videos, he has made a ton of them since league start, so from that point of view I really can't fault it. So, some tips for the build, and Palsteron did mention this, but I completely disregarded it. Mana is just crazy good for scaling damage. It's better than spell damage, it's just insane. It's just so annoying that I spent so much of the early game focused on spell damage and cast speed. Cast speed is important, but mana is the king. As far as gear goes as well, it's really cheap to get high mana ones. Now there is also a 4 curse version of this build which will do a ton more damage. I'm just reluctant to change at this point because I don't want to lose any more tank, and the Mind Spiral helmet gives you a great amount of tank. I also haven't switched out to the brand that casts various skills. And that's because I'm really enjoying using Orb of Storms. I run a lot of Delve, and it's just great for killing mobs that fall near you in Delve. Standing further away from mobs will do more damage. And that's really where you want to be on a ranged character. I play so much melee that it's really hard to keep that distance. But it's well worth it. And to his credit, Palsteron also mentioned this with a picture, so I should have recognised it sooner. The last and probably most important tip is this build has one serious drawback. And that is, if you've played any energy shield build, you know that your energy shield going this low is really, really bad. And it almost repeatedly gives me a heart attack. You have to get used to this quickly. Your energy shield going this low is not a bad thing. You have got an absolute ton of buffer underneath it. So please just learn to notice it and let it go. So would I recommend this build and as a league starter? Absolutely yes. It is one of the most fun builds I think I've ever played. Absolutely amazing. I think you could also lose quite a bit of damage and fix a lot of the issues around defenses. Get some armor and really work on that. Would I recommend this build if you want to kill uber bosses? At this stage, probably not. I am going to push it a bit further and see what I can get out of it. But right now, if you're really focused on uber bosses, I don't think this is the build for you. In the extremely unlikely event that Palsteron is watching this, thank you so much for a great league starter. And with that, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.